Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Maggie.
How's it going?
I am doing great. I am so excited for this topic today. I've been thinking about it for weeks since we decided to put it on the agenda.
We've had a placeholder for this topic for like months. We end up, if you guys knew, we have a backlog of ideas of over 100 episodes, way more than that. And this has been one on there because we've gotten questions on this via email, over Instagram, and questions and then suggestions of show topics. So let's jump in and read one of the actual questions just to give you an idea of what we're going to talk about today.
We've gotten a bunch of messages about our own personal retirement plans. And, we should have seen this coming. It's like, duh, we have a podcast called Friends on Fire. We're still working and people are like, hello, what are your plans? We should have addressed this much sooner.
Well, and we're still working, but we've openly said that we've reached our 5 goals.
Yeah.
So, and that's that's the first half of the equation. And so.
Yeah. So we will try to help people understand our personal situations a little bit more. And if you've been listening to our entire catalog of episodes, you will hear stuff that we have referenced in pieces before, but we're going to pull it all together so that it makes a little sense. And we got a great message that really was the final straw where we were like, we have to finally do an episode.
Yeah, we need to address this. Right.
So here's the message. Mike and Maggie, I've loved getting to know the two of you and learning about your fire journeys through the podcast. But, in all capital letters, I can't seem to get over this one nagging question. Why, having achieved your respective fire numbers, do you stay in corporate jobs? I'm sure each of you can imagine 100, all caps again, different ways to make money and have an impact on the world that are way more interesting and meaningful than working for a large corporation. So what am I missing? Why not work for yourself, doing something super unique when you can clearly afford to do so?
This is a great question. I ask myself this daily. Let's be honest. We'll get into this, right? Because there's a lot of reasons to unpack here. And a lot of them are around our relationship with work. There's, some hard financial reasons, we'll get into it. But I love the thoughtfulness and that someone can see the forest through the trees, right? Of connecting the dots of many of the things that we personally talk about. But I know struggles and challenges that others have also, which perhaps this will help enlighten or kind of, throw some other thoughts into the mix for others also. So what's your answer, Mike? I mean, come on. Why haven't you retired yet?
No, we're going to get to it. We have to build up to our...
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot of layers here.
Yeah. And taking a page out of your book, Maggie, I'm going to provide a lot of context for everybody so that this makes a lot of sense.
We finally hit a topic where Mike wants to provide context.
Because unlike a financial equation, which is a very simple answer and can and should be done concisely, this has a lot of nuance to it. And there are very personal, unique situations and considerations that have to be made, which I have made, and I'm going to explain to everybody. So let's first talk about our thoughts on work, Maggie, because we have mentioned on the show all the time that it's not really about the retire early part for us or what we are promoting so much as the financial independence part. So we're talking about growing wealth. We're talking about gaining freedom and flexibility. And that's been important to us, throughout the years. So let's hear your thoughts on work.
Yeah, I think work is incredibly important, Mike. I have spent my entire life from when I was an early teenager very focused and committed and taking a lot of pride in doing a good job. Literally from when I was a babysitter to, I would babysit kids. And when the kids would go to bed and or while I was there, I would like clean the people's house. I mean, not like deep cleaning. I wasn't doing baseboards, but like I wanted to make sure that when those parents came home, that house was cleaner than when they got there. I would put away the kids' toys. I would clean the kitchen. I would clean up anything that we did. It would look better than it's the same thing I did when I would throw parties in my house when my parents were out of town when I was in high school. My goal was always make that house look better than when they left, and then nobody's going to get mad at me for throwing a party. My point is, from a very early, because you're wondering what's her point, from a very early age, I took a lot of pride in doing a good job and going above and beyond. And I think about that with work of, you know, that's one of the many things that has made me successful at work. But it is an important part of an important part of life. It has been an important part of my identity. That's one of the things I have to unpack, because I think it can be a great confidence booster and a good part of your identity, but then it can also have some bad things if you tie up too much of your identity in work. But those are my, you know, without going into too much context and details, my high level thoughts on just, yes, work is valuable and it's an important part of society. And it often can be the thing that builds us into the people that we are.
I completely agree with you. And when I think back to some of the skills and capabilities that I'm most proud of, and I think back to some of my best relationships that I've formed, like with you, Maggie, it has all come through work.
Yeah. And
the idea that you go through school to prepare you to enter the workforce and be a contributing member of society, and then you go to work and you learn how to interact with people, you learn technical skills, you learn about industries. Perhaps you have the opportunity to go and pursue areas of interest to you. Like, this is great. Working is a great thing. Everybody should do it. Everybody should take it seriously. Now, unfortunately, there are a lot of people who are unhappy in their jobs. And I think a lot of the FIRE movement material out there is kind of highlights people who are 27 and hate their jobs and want to retire and travel the world. And that is not something that like we are super supportive of, you know, like I think, Maggie, you would agree that we would recommend like find something to do professionally that you get more satisfaction from, continue to build skills, continue to build relationships, but don't call it quits after a few years, because you're not going to get the most out of this experience that we call work. I saw a great tweet this morning, which was quite timely, but
do you tweet?
No, I don't. It was on one of these like BuzzFeed things. Where
okay. I was like, I didn't know you were like big on Twitter.
No, it's not. It was just like a picture of a tweet.
Okay.
But it really resonated with me, and it was timely for this episode. It said, "The greatest scam capitalism ever pulled was convincing us that a job was part of our dreams," which I really liked.
Thought-provoking.
Yeah, it is. And
because I was convinced of this at a young age, by the way.
And so I think the point we are trying to make here is that jobs are great. You should definitely pursue a career. You should take your job seriously. You should take pride in your work, but it is not your purpose or your passion or your dreams in most cases. Some people are going to want to take over a company or do certain things professionally, and that's great, but it's the minority of people. Don't get confused that your job is part of your dream. Like, focus on your dreams and use financial independence to go get there. That's kind of our whole thing.
It's funny you say that, Mike, because this is, I think, related, but a bit of an aside. I know people who over the years have been perpetually unhappy at different jobs, and they've been always sort of searching for something professionally. And I've often myself observed that perhaps, yes, there are times when a job is going to be your passion and you feel like you're changing the world and, you know, all these things, it is your dreams. But for a lot of people, a job is a tool to help them on their journey through life, right? And it's something where they need to be, you know, enjoy it enough that they don't hate it, but not assume that a job has to bring them massive amounts of passion. It could be that you actually you get your, you know, passions built out through other things in your life, right? Hobbies and a side hustle, all sorts of, you know, other kind of passion projects. It doesn't have to be where you get your paycheck from. Super cool if it can be, right? And that happens to align, but like you said, it doesn't align for a lot of people. And I think that actually can be okay in many circumstances, especially if you're not miserable, but you're, like, oh, this is a great job. They treat me well. They respect me. I'm paid fairly, and I'm able to provide for my family, and I'm able to then use that money to do the other things in life that I want to pursue.
For some reason, I am just having the strong urge to provide a lot of context right now, Maggie.
Imagine being in that feeling every single day of your life, 24/7.
So hearing you say that reminded me of my first career. I worked in television. I was a writer and producer. And this was my passion. From when I was a little kid, starting in the 5th grade, I was involved in video projects. I thought about it every day. I did projects on it every day. I loved it. I still do. And I do travel videos with my family. I do stuff for the Michigan lacrosse team. It is my biggest passion in life. I pursued that professionally. I studied it in college. I interned with it. I worked part-time when I was in college doing video stuff. I went and worked at NFL Films and then worked for NASCAR Media Group producing TV shows. And I hated it. And it made me miserable. And I was like, this is the worst possible job for me, even though it was my passion. And so I very quickly left and I was like, I'm going to business school. I'm going to go do something else, but I'm going to keep this as my hobby.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you probably didn't make as much money as you make in your current field whatsoever. Too. So to realize, but that's actually, I mean, look, life is an experimentation, right? You have to have gone down that path to know it. So good for you for trying and not have, always wondered and never taking the plunge and then regretting it. So, okay. I think we should, in the spirit of all the context you're giving, Mike, I think we should kind of move through this conversation.
Yeah, you're moving me along on the agenda. All right.
Start to answer the thing. Because in this episode, we want to share why we're still working and what our, rough retirement plans are. Because again, we've gotten that question, aside from the kind of more detailed question that Mike just read. We get that question as a requested show topic all the time, like on Instagram, and we ask, what you guys want to hear and stuff. And so, I think it is worth just kind of walking through some of our key thoughts in this area. And I'll start by saying, we both do plan to retire in our early 40s. I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah,
don't you?
Definitely.
Yeah. And so I'm 41.
I just turned 39.
Just a baby there, 39. Soon you'll be 40. Yeah, we do have plans to retire early. I think it's important maybe to clarify that. We've also talked openly of we have reached our FI number, right? To some level. It's hard. I'm not one of those people who has like an exact number per se, and so I think that may be unique to me, Mike. I don't know if you have like an exact number and you're like, the second I hit that number,
Well, here is where, we've talked about our kind of concerns about the simplicity of the 4% rule as defining your financial independence number. And so by any real measure of it, you and I have hit our FI goals a while ago, but we have very different and complicated structures to our net worth, which make like a FI number and then just like leaving work not really something that we can explain. So yeah, we don't need to work. I think that's the point we're trying to make. Like, we have enough money where if we stop working, we'd be okay. That's financial independence.
And we also know that we could easily make more money again if we ever had to, right?
Yeah.
But I will say, part of my, we'll unpack kind of why we're still working, right? But I would say, one of the reasons, which is only one of, to be really clear, is the idea of some additional padding is a nice thought, right? So yes, I on paper have enough money and have reached that quote FI level, but I also like additional padding. I got 3 kids. I don't, I would love to be in a position to do a lot more for my kids. And I'm not knocking my parents, by the way. They gave me a lot based on what they had, but like, I would love to be in a position that if they are good students and they're doing things responsibly at that age, I'd love to be able to help them even more with college and other things, right? And so I still do have a lot of like in my head, like, oh, the additional padding is one of the reasons, right? But there's a bunch of other reasons that are arguably larger than the additional financial padding from continuing to work.
Yeah, the way I think about it and would explain it is like, it's not like you and I have $100 million where we'd be like, well, shit, we don't need to worry about anything ever again. Let's quit
even
and go
a
buy,
crazy emergency.
vacation homes all over the world. But we have enough where we can comfortably live the rest of our lives.
Yeah, and the way we like to live, right?
Yeah,
Which is not
exactly.
super ostentatious, and we live fairly frugal lives.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that we don't still value getting more money and appreciate having an even larger safety net.
Yeah. So let's run through. I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons is we are still making money and we're making good money, but also we don't hate our jobs, right? That's probably one of the biggest reasons. So we're going to there's not like a list here per se, but we're going to kind of rattle through the reasons that we are still working, and that we've got a little bit more gas left in our tank, right?
And you say we don't hate our jobs. I actually really like my job.
Yeah, that's fair.
I enjoy it a lot. I enjoy the technical complexity of my job. I enjoy the leadership aspect of my job, managing people and partnering with a large organization at work. I like the social elements of my job. I like the industry I'm working in. Like, I really like my job. Now, that doesn't mean I like it more than traveling with my kids, because I don't. But as far as like things to do with the majority of my time, I really like it.
Yeah, I'm in the same camp. So I like to, say we don't hate our jobs, but the only thing I quote hate about my job at times is the stress and the level of demands, right? That it is never sort of done or off. It's hard to let go at the end of the day. Some weeks there's, less going on and it's easier to let go. But I am torn a lot in that camp, right? Because I do love my job. And I switched jobs about a year ago into a job that really is like, at this point in my life, if I could have designed my dream job in a company that I like, that's kind to me, that I respect, which I feel like I work at. And Mike, I think you would agree. And for those that might be new listeners, we work at the same company. So I am torn because I like the company. I like what I'm doing. And I more than like what I'm doing. This is the job I asked for that I didn't think was even possible. And I got it. And that I am torn a lot of days because I enjoy and get a lot of good feelings from the work I'm doing. Like, this has been a particularly kind of busy week personally and professionally for me. And when I'm so busy at work, I get good feelings from it. I'm feeling really productive and on top of things, and like I'm adding value and doing good stuff. But I also have so little margin, and I'm not who I want to be around my kids when things get busy, that, that's the piece where I say I'm torn, is like, it's like I want it all. You want to be good at your career. You want to be a good parent. You want to be a good person to yourself and practice the self-care that's important to you. And sometimes it's just hard to do it all. It is, I don't want to say hard. It's impossible to do it all. You are constantly letting something go. And the older I get, the more I have to let myself and my kids go, and my family and my friends and everything else go in that equation, and put work first. The more, it's not about, again, hating my job because I love my job. It's, there might not be room for it all in my life. Right. And speaking of room, I think, one of the things we'll talk about is, we have been able to get some semblance of flexibility, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the other point I would make, just in the category of, we actually do still enjoy our jobs. And if we didn't enjoy our jobs, I think Mike and I would agree, if we didn't enjoy our jobs, if we didn't feel respected and cared for by the company that we work for, we wouldn't be working right now in a heartbeat.
Definitely.
Right? If something happened that changed that situation, I've joked before, like, somebody looks at me wrong, like, I'm out of here. Right. And I'm serious. Right. So it's tough because all of those boxes are ticked, right? It's the volume. That's my one issue, is the volume, and it just never it's hard to fit it all into my life. Right.
Yeah.
And I want to have a full life in other categories. And I've spent 20 years, at least 10 to 15 of those years, putting work first before other things in my life. I've been significantly better over the last, somewhere between 5 to 8 years since I had kids. 20 years is a long time. So even though when I kind of think about the identity and the everything we were talking about in the beginning of, like, wanting to work and the pride and take what, like, the part of your life that, work sits in, I sometimes try to appreciate that, like, I have worked professionally post college for 20 years, right? And I've done good and I've been successful. And I need to kind of appreciate that and not wonder like, well, it's unconventional to leave, when you could be doing all of these things.
So are you saying you don't identify as a podcaster? Because I do.
I do, actually. I do. But you know what? Sometimes that's a good example of there are things, there's sometimes that we get on to record, Mike, where I am so scattered and busy and jamming this in between 50 other things that I'm not giving it my best, right? And I want to give it my best because I care about this a lot. I was about to say more, but I don't want to but I care about this a lot. And the same way I care about my kids a lot. Well, you could argue I care about my kids more than the podcast, but I'm just saying there's a lot of things I care about a lot, but I constantly put them after my paid employment job, right? Yeah. And that's a habit. That's a identity. There's a million reasons why. Oh, also, I mean, I'm getting paid to do it. So that's one of the reasons. And I want to fulfill my end of that, transaction. But it's the piece that makes it, anyways, we could go on this forever. The point is we actually still enjoy our jobs, and that makes it harder to leave.
But while we enjoy our jobs, we enjoy other stuff more. And what we really want is to work less. And I think most people who are in demanding jobs can appreciate this because we work all the time and it's constantly on our mind. And what we really want is some flexibility. We don't want to give up entirely all of these things that make work so important to our lives. We want flexibility, and we've both gotten it. And this is an important reason why we are still working. So Maggie, you went first with your request for some flexibility.
I requested it about 2 years ago, then COVID hit. About a year ago, I moved into a job where I moved to 80%. So I get 1 day off a week, or basically I work 32 hours instead of, I used to work way more than 40. But I basically, I took a 20% cut on everything across the board, and I work 80%. And for me, that is working 4 days, not 5.
And for me, working 4 days a week is not ideal because I would still be thinking about it on the 5th day. Yeah. That's not my idea of flexibility. My idea of flexibility is taking blocks of time off. And so I was very fortunate where I asked to take the summer off and they let me. And I'm going to continue doing it. And this is the balance that I want in my life because for like the 8th time, I really enjoy my job. But what I like more, what I really want more of in my life is to travel with my family. And if I can do that for a huge amount of time over the summer when the kids are not in school and we don't have these commitments, that's perfect for me. Like that is what I want. And so the fact that I can have both of these things is really, I'm extremely fortunate, and I understand that. But that's the reason why I'm still working. I get both of these things.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've been able to do that. And to your point, yeah, the 80% has been a good move and a good experiment, but it's not enough, right? It's still, you're right. It's hard to turn it off. I still end up, and it's my own habits and the demand. It's a mix of both. But it's better, but it is not enough of where I need to get to. Mm-hmm. But I'm really glad I've done it and that I'm doing it and sticking with it. A lot of corporate jobs are probably like this. And corporate may be the wrong word, but what do people call it? Like desk jobs or I don't know how to call it.
White collar jobs?
Yeah, white collar jobs. But I was more thinking, I feel like there's some term that keeps getting used during COVID of, anyways, a lot of like, there's a piece of our knowledge worker. That might be a good way of what I'm thinking. A lot of knowledge worker jobs, at least the type we're in. Yes, there's a lot of meetings and certain times you have to be at things, but there is a good bit of like flexibility and autonomy in, if I need to clear out an afternoon, sometimes there's things that I just have to prioritize at work, but like I can, hang out with my kids in the afternoon a little bit and then work more at night, right? There's some level of kind of flexibility on that. The volume is tough to adjust, but there is sometimes flexibility on when I can do things, which I appreciate and value a lot. And is nice that, if I had to like physically be somewhere every day from, 8 to 6, I don't think I'd still be doing this. Right. And to that point, right, COVID gave us a lot more flexibility to work from home, which is also helping a lot with me personally. Okay. So as we've said before, as soon as any of these things stop, we'll be a lot closer to retiring, but we're not that far off. Right. And, I think we can get into a couple more reasons, Mike.
Okay.
One is the money, which we've talked about, right? So we already talked about the kind of padding concept earlier, but we do get, I'll just reiterate it. And I'm not saying this to brag in any way. I'm saying this because the question was asked of why we're still working. One of the reasons is it's good money, right? And I personally, I don't know if you have this, Mike, but tied to the money, I still have, I'm not even sure how to describe it, but there is someone who has described it, and it's called the 1 more year syndrome, which I think you've heard of. And it's the idea of, especially when you're making higher amounts of money, there's this concept of like, ooh, just 1 more year. I'm just going to give it 1 more year. I'm just going to, I'll get this much more money if I work 1 more year, and that'll feel really good to, further pad my calculations and my future and everything else. And I definitely have some of that, right? And a lot of it is because of all the reasons, not just the money. It's because of all the reasons we've just talked about. But I'm like constantly like, oh, just 1 more year. Things aren't terrible. I could do this for 1 more year. And I also have a lot of. I don't feel like you have that though, Mike.
I do.
Okay.
But like all emotions, I just have them at a lower level than
muted
other
level,
people.
Yeah.
So I understand and appreciate the concerns and the fear that you have and the reason why it's just 1 more year. And I think it comes down to when you are looking at what you earn for your time now and what you will be doing with your free time, sometimes it doesn't seem to make sense. If you were saying I make $10 an hour and I want to go give that up to go travel, like, yeah, that for a lot of people, that'd be
easier to walk away
it's easier to walk
Yeah.
away from. When you make 10 times that an hour or 20 times that an hour or 50 times that an hour, then it's sort of like, do I really want to give that up to go watch some more Netflix and just chill out with my life? And it is so hard to process.
This is so unconventional too.
Yeah.
There's not as many people who have taken that path.
So I can appreciate it. And I do have the same thing. Like I earn quite a bit of money. My lifestyle is pretty good. Maybe if I just worked 1 more year, work would be a little bit different, or, I wouldn't miss this opportunity too much. So I get it. I have just had a lot longer to think about this and plan for it than you have.
I think that is a big thing with you versus me, is just that you grew up with this being part of your like mentality and identity. And I grew up with the opposite, right? I grew up thinking I'm going to work forever and I'm going to achieve great things and I'm going to keep being driven and keep doing more and more and taking on more and more. And so for me, I'm having to like rewire, and I want to, right? I'm realizing that there are other better paths for me and that are exciting and intriguing, and that I want to go down that other door, that, the 2 paths in front of you and you take the less traveled path. Like I want to go down the less traveled path. I'm now, drinking that Kool-Aid, whatever you want to say. And I'm excited for it, but I still have a lot of fear associated with it. Right. And that's one of the reasons why I have this, 1 more year syndrome per se. And I often try to think like, what am I afraid of? Right. It's a mix of fear and a mix of it being unconventional and it being, thinking. I grew up kind of so pragmatic and thinking, well, my goodness, if someone is willing to pay me a very healthy amount of money to do something and I'm good at it and I'm adding value and I'm getting something out of it too, why would you walk away from that? Like, I think about my parents or my grandparents' generation and just looking at that and being like, oh, why would she walk away from that? Good paying, secure job where she's treated nicely. And it's just, why would you walk away from something like that? That's a good paying job where you've succeeded, you've continued to advance, they respect you, you're good at it, and all these other things. And it's unconventional to walk away from it. And then I also have all these other fears in my head, which I can get into.
So you mentioned choosing the road less traveled. And it's funny. God, I'm going to drop some more context on you about my childhood, Maggie. I am turning into you.
I love
now.
it. I know. I'm rubbing off on you. It's working. This has been a slow burn. I've been working on you for like 2 years.
Yeah,
Mike.
I know. Yeah, you finally succeeded. So, The Road Not Taken is a poem by Robert Frost, and it's my dad's favorite poem. And he like had this with him all of the time when I was growing up, and he shared it with me and constantly brings it up. And so I will, for the first time ever, read a little poetry on the Friends on Fire podcast.
Nice.
I'm not going to read
That's
the whole
good
thing.
since I butchered the phrase when I was saying it a second ago.
So I'll read the first paragraph and then finish with the end, because it's the end is what has always stuck with me.
That's powerful.
So by Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. And at the end, I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference.
That literally makes me cry, Mike. I know you're gonna like between all this context and then my emotions, you're gonna like hang up on me soon, but that just makes me like emotional. It really does. It like really makes me emotional. Okay. He says, I'm so glad you read that. He says, I'm sorry I could not travel both. That's how I feel. That's like a great way of saying it. I'm going to quit crying in a minute. By the way, for those who don't know me, I cry during like rom-coms on Netflix. I cry during every movie I ever watch on planes. Okay. But that makes me like emotional, because this is like when we talked about this topic and we were like, there's so much to unpack here of, you know, just that it's an unconventional path. But I love that he says, I'm sorry I could not travel both, because it's true. It's what we've been describing with so much context today on, you know, we don't hate our jobs, right? I wish I could travel both paths. I wish I could do it all. And I think the older I get, I realize I just can't do it all. Right. And so I am sold on the other path, right? The road less, what does he say? The road less.
The Road Not Taken.
The Road Not Taken. Sorry, I was starting to cry so much I couldn't keep listening. So yeah, I appreciate you reading that. That's so interesting that your dad had that as like something that, you know, was on the forefront. Okay. So yeah, I think, you know, when I've talked about like how I have a lot of fear sometimes in this category of life, like, you know, a lot of it is around this kind of like, it's irresponsible to walk away from, you know, a good paying job with a good company. And every time I think that now, I'm going to reread that poem, and then it's going to make me cry and remember what's important in life. And then sometimes, again, I worry that like, oh, something will happen and I'll run out of money or whatever. And I need to not worry about that, because I know I can make more. A, I know I have enough. And B, I know if something were to happen, I can always make more. And I'm not afraid to go back and do something different or to do anything I need to do to, you know, make money to provide for myself or my family.
Yeah. And, you know, I have all of those same fears. It's hard not to when you are ingrained by society to think that you can only survive by working your entire life and you'll never have enough. But again, like I've had a long time to think about this, and you know, being comfortable with the math really helps. But, you know, I'm also a little worried that I'm going to start it and it won't be what I want. It will take me a long time to figure out exactly what makes me happy. I am going to, you know, miss the social aspect of this stuff. I'm going to miss the relationships. I'm worried I might not be able to find the same level of intellectual stimulation. So I have all of those same fears. I think I'm probably a little more confident that the stuff that I would go pursue with the majority of my time, like I know that I will be able to do that, and I know it makes me happy.
Yeah. Like this podcast even.
Yeah, like this
right?
podcast.
And on the point you were just making, Mike, my husband, Greg, likes to say, when we retire, it won't be the end of us being productive members of society, right? Like we're, like you said, we're not going to retire and just like lay around all day. I'm going to do that for a while, because I just need to like regain some, you know, rest and relaxation and mental clarity and other things. But we're not going to literally like do nothing and sit around, I don't even know what I would sit around. I'm not capable of just sitting around and doing nothing. I hope I'll get better at relaxing and many things. And another thing, this is related, but kind of switching topics a little bit, is there's this quote that I think I've shared before that I heard this guy who tweets under the name Landshark. He says that at a certain point you realize you've won the game. And so why do you need to keep playing? And I really love kind of the point he was making there, because I sometimes do think like when I have all these things about like it's an unconventional path, is this the right thing to do? Is this weird? Just all these things. And I actually look back and think, you know what? I've had a very successful career for 20 years. I've done all the things I was supposed to do, quote unquote, right? If that's the stuff that, gets me hung up in my head, I did it. I played the game and I did well at the game, right? I don't know if you could say you won the game, because I don't know how you win. By the way, I was playing Foursquare yesterday with my friend Mary, who's in town. And she's one of our biggest fans. Hey, Mary. And she at one point was like, well, how do you win Foursquare? And I was like, I don't know. You don't. You win like a round or something, or you don't get out. And I was like, that's a great point. She was like, I like games where there's like a clear winner. And I was like, oh, it's a good point. This game's just going to go on for hours. No one will ever win. So I just think like, I've played the game. I've done well at it. And maybe there'll be I love the term encore career. Have you heard that term? Like encore career that I'll have later on that is different, right? And that is, that isn't this podcast. That's probably going to be my encore career, to be clear. But yeah, just that, back to my point of like, this isn't the end of us. When we retire, it will not be the end of us being productive members of society, because all those things that you just said, Mike, I still value, right? And want that connection and that feeling of accomplishment. And, I'm going to need to get it somewhere to be happy. And I do know enough about myself to know that.
Yeah.
But I could get that connection by taking Aikido lessons, which is one of the things I've always thought would be cool to do, and doing really well at that. Right. And getting and finding a community there and getting a lot of personal gain. I'm just using that as an example. I could get that. I already get that from this podcast and from the community of people that I don't feel like I have enough time to engage with in a meaningful way most days. Okay. This has been a lot of context. How you doing, Mike? I know this is out of your comfort zone.
I have been sharing a lot of context and talking about my childhood. You started crying for a period of time.
And then you were crying. I could see it.
Yeah, we read some poetry. You weren't
gushing the way I was, but...
This has been quite an episode.
Yeah. I think it's the first time I've ever made you cry, Mike. You made me cry reading that. I teared up a little bit. And then I was like, you weren't to the point where you couldn't get your words out like me, but I could see your...
I wasn't inconsolable.
Yeah, you weren't inconsolable.
I was touched.
Yes. So should we wrap this up?
I think we have to wrap this up.
Okay. Bring it home.
All right. Let's give our top 3 takeaways.
Yes.
Number 1, we do plan to retire in our early 40s. So that's as specific as we're going to get, but I hope that gives people the answer they've been looking for.
Yes. Including ourselves, right? I've been looking for the answer. So thanks for giving it to me. Number 2, we're assessing things as we go, right? If any of the things that are important to us end up more out of whack than they already are, the only thing out of whack that, we talk about is just the volume, right? And the kind of room in our lives for all these things. But just, this is just like all things in life. As new information comes in and as anything changes, we'll adjust our plans.
And number 3, if you're looking for some inspiration or a lesson from this episode, is that don't be afraid. Don't get caught up in one more year syndrome. Be true to your why. We talk about that a lot, your why for financial independence. And do what matters to you in your life.
Don't be afraid to take the path not taken. That's or the path less traveled.
All right, Maggie. This was quite an episode.
It was. We'll put a link to Robert Frost's poem in the show notes.
Okay.
So if you want to have a little cry with us, feel free to. And as usual, thank you all for listening. If you have been challenged or inspired by what you heard, please rate and review the show. If you want to leave a podcast review for us on Apple Podcasts, we always love it with like an actual written review. It really helps us. And you can comment about whether you like when we cry on the show or not. Do you want more crying, less crying? You let us know. We aim to please.
And you can also subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode. If you have any thoughts or questions, we'd love to hear from you, and you can leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370 or hit us up on Instagram.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks,
Bye.
Maggie. Bye.